Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host, as always, and joining me in this, what appears to be a weekly counselling session for Rangers fans, is my very good friend, Ross Hutton. Ross, thank you very much for coming on to Extra, your debut for the season.
New season, new therapy session, Cammy. Thanks for having me.
And yeah, as much as we say things on you, Ross, some things just feel to be exactly the same.
Well, you and I were both standing at Tannadice in the opening game of the season, and I discussed it with you boys at the time. I discussed it on the exec report on our Patreon site with James. We're going to discuss it again now. It feels very much like the new regime is exactly the same as the old regime. And I don't just mean the management team, I mean the new players on the side. I mean the new vibe around the season, because it doesn't feel like we've moved on or moved the dial at all since May. And I actually came into this season with a wee bit of optimism, to be honest, about some of the signings that we had made. And yes, I didn't think they were all going to be superstars and hit the ground running automatically, but in theory, I can really get behind the likes of Lord and Shankland. I like the idea of Dan Neil. I think Cammy Devlin and Ross McCrory could do a job for Rangers. So there were some tentative, embryonic, encouraging signs there, for me at least. Looking across the city, okay, Celtic have broken the transfer record, but it doesn't seem like they've really pushed the boat outside of that to move the dial either. So I thought, you know what, if we can hit the ground running, if we can get some good results, momentum under our belt, then who knows where it goes. But we've had a very, to put it politely, stuttering start to the season, haven't we? The point at Tannadice in the fullness of time, who knows what that will mean, but the performances have been the really damaging element of all this. If we were playing really well and we're just being unlucky in front of goal, then okay, we could say, right, we have something to hold on to here. That's not been the case at all. Front, middle to back, it's been pretty appalling to watch, in all honesty, barring, I think, 10 minutes against Dundee United. Last night was a top to bottom awful performance from start to finish. I think we deserve to lose that game. Coming away from it, Cammy, I'm just quite grateful that we're still in the tie, because I was really worried when it went to 2-1 that we would just fall to pieces and then we could have a really uphill battle at Ibrox next Thursday. So unless things improve and improve very quickly, then the fan base quite simply does not have the patience to deal with this anymore. We said the same last season, and I think it's even more true this season.
Yeah, I mean, we'll touch on, because there's a lot of kind of wide-ranging points there, which I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. We'll break down. Let's kick off first with last night's foray as we return to the Europa League and our qualifier against Polish team Jagiellonia. I'll be honest with you, Ross, I know very, very little about them. I think that, that is the nature of the very early qualifiers, is that you'll be facing teams very much low down in the rankings. However, we don't have the right, and it's never in my nature to be disrespectful towards teams, saying that you should look at them and go, I'm very, very confident we should beat them. And I thought, just slightly contrary to your point, I actually thought Rangers started okay in the opening stages of the game last night. We took a very early lead. Thanks to some good work by Tur Romans down on the left-hand side, crosses the ball in, Chermiti completely misses it, and Rangers go 1-0 up. Now, I think for me, and I'm sorry to kind of skip ahead with this because I wanted to highlight one of the few highlights in terms of how we actually started the game, because when I was looking at the lineups, you and I, as you've just mentioned there, we were obviously up at Tannadice, and we saw what I thought was quite an interesting and surprising lineup. This one I felt a little bit more stable. Chikwani came back in after, he's played in the preseason friendlies, but there felt like a bit of a disconnect from how he picked his starting 11 against Dundee United to what we saw last night. Daniel obviously comes as the surgery that had to happen in the defence with McCrory and Sterling because of the injury to Ben Godfrey. And new player Yokota started, which was a surprise to me because I'm just so used to Rangers making signings and them not being featured for 3 or 4 weeks into the kind of following games. But that was pretty much for me the brightest part of last night's game was our opening period. And Rangers, through, a catalogue of complete catastrophes, decided that they would allow Jagiellonia back into the game. We concede with a Manny Fernandez own goal. 10 minutes later, and only about 10 minutes, not even that, I don't think. After that, we were now 2-1 behind. So we have went from a decent position to being a bit precarious to it turning into a complete disaster. I'll break down the goals we conceded in just a minute, Ross, but there's a wider point here, and I do want to talk about this to some length about an attitude issue, but this is not a new thing. And as much as we're having a bit of gallows humour around, meet the new team the same as the old team, there is a problem here that we called out a number of times last season, that Rangers struggle to play well for consistent periods of time. And despite that bright start and getting our noses in front, yes, of course, a bit of good fortune with the OG. I still felt that we were looking a bit more positive. I thought we had a bit of an upturn from how we finished the game against Dundee United. But the manner of the goals in which we are conceding to now is just, I mean, it's comical. And again, if you were looking at this, having this been your first season ever watching Rangers, you'd think, okay, well, fair enough, there's rustiness. We need to be able to try and get a wee bit more gelling and cohesion going on. The principal players who are at fault for the 2 goals that we conceded are players who were here last season, and this is not a new problem.
No, it's not. And I think this is the frustrating thing with Rangers, and this feeds into the feeling of why we are quite so despondent, I think, as a fan base, because we have seen this before. This is a side, cumulative over the past few years, that plays in minutes and moments. I don't think we can put our hand on our heart and say that we have shown consistently good attacking patterns of play across a number of seasons now with a number of different players and a number of different managers. We seem to concede the same laughable goals over a number of years with different players and different managers. And this is a bizarre thing. And I'm actually a bit of a loss with this now, Cam, because I don't know how you fix this. We've changed the manager, we've changed the personnel on the park as well, we've changed the owners, for crying out loud. And the same mistakes still seem to be being made, the same things still seem to be happening. And, as a Rangers fan watching this, going into this game, I don't think we are necessarily expecting on the second game of the season to see free-flowing attacking patterns of play, right? That's not necessarily what I'm looking for, but what I'm looking for is a bit of defensive solidity there, and I think we've all commented on it, to be fair. One of the things that we thought we'd be getting from Derek McInnes very early on would be defensive solidity, and if we can use that as the foundation and building blocks, and I know it's a cliche to build on, then fantastic. Especially after last season, especially after the tail end of last season, when we were chucking goals in left, right, and centre. We're still doing that. We've changed the goalkeeper, who wasn't there last season. Ross McCrory wasn't there last season, but the vibe is still the exact same, and that's the frustration, because we don't seem to have made any kind of forward progress from that. And if you're Derek McInnes, who has watched Rangers near enough week in, week out last season, or for the last number of seasons, however long you want to go back, knows what I would think he would know intrinsically what our issues were. To not fix that, first and foremost, is a deep frustration. And we can't rely on having to score 2, 3, 4 goals every single game just to get out of Dodge. That's not going to be possible, especially not at this stage of the season. I think the thing that's given me a bit of hope, and I'm clinging on to this for dear life, to be honest, Cammy, is that I'm hoping that by the start of September, the squad and the starting 11 will look very different to the one that starts August and at the end of July. But we need to see some more quality coming in at both ends of the park, because it's just not good enough at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that back line, and I'm going to give some of the new players a pass, and I'm going to include McCrory in that. I know he's been here before, he understands the club, I understand all of that, right? But I'm going to give some of the new players a pass because I have to, right? I feel a bit beholden to this idea that we can't make snap decisions and players need to come in, they need to settle in. You're right, there will obviously be further changes made, but in terms of the hand that we have at the moment, then when you do look at that back line, I think Pandur is an upgrade on Butland. Romans finished the season well. I think he got a lot of credit for filling into a left back position that we had real question marks over, and he came in and he looked solid. He looked the piece. The issue that we've had with right back, not just in last night, but I'm thinking, how obviously we've started the season. is whether you're playing Sterling there or whether or not you're going to play McCrory. I'm not going to put it back onto this idea of that whilst James Tavernier was a magnificent, easy for me to say, servant to Rangers, he was a problem. And he was a problem at right. So it's not as if we've lost that absolute star quality right back who, was really solid. And now all of a sudden there's huge gaps. Those gaps were there when James Tavernier was there, right? So let's not rewrite history. So we've deliberately targeted the right back area. I'm not wholly convinced at the moment that we've done that sufficiently. And we've had to do the chop and change with McCrory and Sterling across not just the friendly games, but the competitive games as well. So that is an area of focus. What is terrifying me at the moment, if I'm being perfectly honest, is Manny Fernandez. Now, I'll give him a bit of a pass for the OG that led to the Jagiellonia equaliser because it's a nothing cross that's coming in. He's probably not in the best position, right? I accept that. But he clearly just feels he has to try and get something on it. And by doing so, Sterling is because Sterling's obviously Marky's man. Fernandez didn't have a man next to him. Sterling is anticipating the flight of the ball, and that it completely puts him off. So Fernandez more or less takes it away from him and it sneaks in at the back post. Okay, I kind of get it, right? That happens. That's not a problem. The second goal is systematic throughout the whole team. I'm not just blaming in the defence for this. I'm not going to blame Tello Asgard for what he tried to do was a cute wee flick to be able to try and just open up the defence. I get it's a bit lazy and it's a little bit expectant, but at the same point, I do understand why he tried to do it. But the problems thereafter, Ross, are what we are seeing and what you've mentioned before about the general performance. We are so slow to be able to try and recover. And Jagiellonia have to go up the entire length of the pitch, literally from their own 18-yard line, all the way up. Fernandez slips at the crucial moment, and it's comical. I can't think of another word for it. It's amateurish, and we are absolute bits and pieces. Now, I'm going to kind of further emphasise this point with a chance that came. I think it was around about the half-hour mark because I want to bring something to light which is frustrating me more than anything else. Jagiellonia are able to get onto a loose ball that's played back by Dujon Sterling. It's not close to Fernandez. He loses out in it. Again, we're then having to get back on our heels and nothing comes of it. I know that people at the time, when we were talking about it, were looking at Fernandez. There's a man coming down our right-hand side, or our left-hand side, rather, and if he was to go in the diagonal and drive in towards goal, he probably could have got a better shot away than he did. Fernandez hesitates because he's now in two minds as to whether or not to go out to the ball or to then cover his man. The attacking player is actually 5 feet, I would say, or 5 yards, I would say, away from Sterling when he originally loses the ball. Now, if anyone's had the opportunity, because I was watching it earlier on today, watch Sterling. Because Sterling misplaces a pass. He blames Fernandez and he's static. I mean, he physically stops. And the man in front of him, who he should be chasing, gets a good solid 3, 4, 5 yards head start on him because he's on his toes. Sterling is just apathetic to the fact that he's lost the ball. He's immediately gone into blame mode. And then he then has to be able to recover that distance that he's lost. And a chance came out of it. It is almost exactly the same shit body language that I've seen for some of the players that you and I saw at Tannadice. There's this arms in the air, a bit of finger pointing, and whether or not you concede or whether or not you get away with it doesn't really seem to matter to these players. We are too slow to be able to react. We seem to think as if we've got the right to be able to hold on to the ball, and that if we lose it, that the team will do us a favour and not punish us, which is completely wrong. And that's the thing I can't stand at the moment. I can forgive players if they do make an error. I cannot forgive this apathy that seems to have crept in and this looking like victims all the time. It is absolutely driving me crazy. And that's on players who have been here for a wee while.
Yeah, it's quite impressive to make as many errors as they do, yet to never make a mistake in their lives, to be honest, because it's always someone else's fault. And actually, I think the two of them are as bad as each other. I
Brilliant
mean,
point.
I
That's
think
an absolutely brilliant point.
I really do think the two of them are as bad as each other. The amount of times, well, three times we've conceded this season already, and I think at every single goal, Fernandes has turned around just to shout at somebody else in his general vicinity. There seems to be a bit of a blame culture around that back line, and I don't know if it seems to be people just not wanting to take responsibility and own their own mistakes. I don't expect footballers to be absolutely pitch perfect for 90 minutes, right? It's impossible. I'm not expecting them to be Messi or Beckenbauer or anyone like that. But if you make a mistake, listen, that's fine. The reaction at that point becomes the most important thing. What are you going to do to try and rectify that? If you misplace a pass, okay, right, shit happens. What are you going to do to try and win the ball back? If you don't make a challenge, okay, what are you going to do to try and win the ball back? That should be your focus at that point, instead of going automatically into this mode, like you say, where you're wanting to blame somebody else. And that can't be a healthy culture to play in. And that's the worrying thing for me, Cammy. This isn't It's bad enough when it happens in May, right? When the wheels are coming off the season and everyone's looking for an excuse to blame somebody else so it's not their fault that we've blown the league again. This is August. And if you really want to stretch it, if it's happening in July, in the first game of the season, it's really, really disappointing and infuriating to watch as a Rangers fan. And if that's what we're like now, as I say, at the start of August, then what is it going to be like in a few months' time? I don't know what the management team has to do to try and batter that out of them, but they need to try and do it quickly, because if you're living in constant fear of making a mistake, right, then that's not conducive to good performance. If you're then living in constant fear of making a mistake, knowing that even if you don't make a mistake, you're going to get the blame for somebody else's, that's even worse. So that absolutely has to be stamped out ruthlessly at this stage of the season, because, as I say, that just cannot be a healthy environment to play your football in.
I don't even know. See, it's interesting you mention that because I don't even know if it is necessarily a fear of making a mistake with some of these players. And I want
I
to,
think some of them look terrified, mate. I really do think some of them look terrified.
and do you know what? I can almost understand that if you are new in the building and you are having to settle in and you want to make and I do believe this, by the way. Like, I don't think we've got anyone in the team who necessarily sets out to play badly, but I could almost forgive it for any of the new intake because, again, they need a bedding in period. It's very rare a player comes in and just hits the ground running. We're not signing players who are absolute world beaters who fundamentally believe that they can beat everyone else in front of them. Do you know what I mean, we don't shop in that market, right? What I am concerned about in terms of this culture that you speak of I'm all right. Like, I've managed people a long time, Ross, right? And I don't run a culture of fear within any of my teams. And the reason why I don't do that is because my mantra is always making the mistake is not the crime. The crime is failing to learn from the mistake. But the way how some of these players are quite happy to blame each other, I don't even think that they believe that they are the ones at fault. I think they think it's the other person. And that's toxic, as you mentioned. That's poor. Because if I was Derek McInnes and I was playing that back and I was dissecting the chance I've just spoken about there, where, like I say, Jagiellonian didn't score from it, but it's a problem. I would want to ask those players, who is it you think it's at fault here? Because I don't think, certainly not in Dujon Sterling's case, but that's just that incident alone. I can get you other instances, as we saw at Tannadice, where I think Manny Fernandez would turn around and say, I'm not at fault there. And that is the biggest issue. I don't listen. Sterling, for me, we can't rely on Sterling. That's not new news. So I'm not necessarily saying that this is a thing that he needs to be able to deal with because he's not going to play consistently. So he'll be in and out the team. So his chances to make those mistakes or those opportunities are going to be rare. If we are, and it looks certainly very much like it, wanting to be able to build this defence around Manny Fernandez, he has to be, for me, McInnes's main point of focus now. And I genuinely don't know what he does with them. Because I think if you go in and you bollock a player, especially within your first 3 months of managing him, and you go in and you absolutely bollock him, your problem that you've got, and you know this as well, you can use the carrot and stick approach, but if you use the stick, you can't do it multiple times. And unless Rangers are now seriously considering buying a centre half to replace him, then McInnes is going to have to sit him down and work out exactly what it is that's happening at the moment. Because you're absolutely right. And I was in exactly the same space. I think that the boys talked about it on our post-match show on Patreon last night. The comfort you got with Derek McInnes being able to come in was he's going to make us hard to beat. He's want to set up from the back. I think we've bought a very, very good goalkeeper. I think that we did have positions that we had to be able to address. We can't deal with the Godfrey issue. And I'm not even necessarily convinced that Ben Godfrey's the absolute answer at the moment. But whilst we have this calamitous disorganisation, the aforementioned apathy at the back, opposition teams will absolutely lap it up at the moment. They will absolutely lap it up because we're now causing our own problems. And that, for me, is something that Derek, and I don't know how he's going to do it, but he has to do it. Otherwise, this will just be repeat, repeat, repeat. And we've seen this movie before, Ross. We know what the answer is, and it'll be Derek McInnes out in his arse.
Well, I was going to say that, Cammy, actually. If Derek McInnes wants to trust these players, and this is not just a point about Manny Fernandes, this goes across the board, players who have let other managers down before, then he's going to end up the same way as those other managers before. This is his dream job, Derek McInnes here. I don't suspect he's going to want to try and trust players that he knows are going to let him down, but these players have a pattern of behaviour and a pattern of performance, and listen, it's bearing out again. The Manny Fernandes one is probably, for my money, the most frustrating for me, Cammy. He's probably been the biggest individual disappointment so far this season. And I get, right, we're only a week and 2 games in, so I'm not wanting to throw the baby out the bathwater too much here. But across the 2 games, he has been the biggest individual disappointment for me because with maybe it was just a purple patch, but we do know what he is capable of at both ends of the park as an attacking threat from corners and, most importantly for us, defensively. But then McInnes now has a massive decision to make ahead of Sunday, and I don't want to jump ahead too much in terms of the conversation, but we do have another centre half there who, funnily enough, we moved heaven and earth to try and get to Poland last night in Makania and then just sat him on the bench. We all know what happened with his visa issues and how much turmoil we had to go through to try and get him on that flight over there, and decided not to use him. But he has an option there for Sunday. We've paid good money for him. So I would be quite surprised not to see him against Hibs. But who's that for? Is it going to be for Fernandes? Because that's a massive call to drop him. And that's taking the stick and really using it at that point. If you're saying you've been so bad over the past 2 games, I don't trust you in my back line. And by the way, McInnes, for my money, would have every right to say and do that. Or does he drop McCrory? Because he trusts Fernandes as somebody who's played 55 games, whatever it is for Rangers now, and there is something in him where we know we can get a good level of performance. That's a decision that McInnes is going to have to live or die by, not just maybe for Sunday, but going forward with the season as well, especially if Godfrey's injury turns out to be a long-term one.
And Fernandes, when we were talking about the potential selection for the new captain, Fernandes was in that conversation with us. And that's where the drop-off for me is just startling, because I don't see us getting into the stage of dropping him at the moment just now. I think you're right, makes a massive statement. And that is really problematic, because I think that when you are in the beginnings of your manager-player relationship, if you make a big statement like that, I think we've seen it before. Some players, it can be tough to recover from, and you need big characters to be able to try and do that. And that is probably the root of my frustration at the moment, is I am asking about his character, because I'm really struggling to see as to where there's been a mega consistency based on how he's wanted to be able to start it. Now, yes, you made a great point earlier on. This is very much the beginning of the season, right? So whether or not we call it a blip or whatever we call it just now, fine. But it's Derek McInnes' job to solve it, and he needs to be able to put that back to Fernandes and say, at the moment just now, how would you assess where you're playing? How would you assess as to how you're working as part of this team? Because from what I'm seeing, it's got some real significant gaps in there, and we are signing players based on working that around Fernandes, not replacing him. Now, if a big money offer came in for him between now and the end of the window and it turned our heads and we had to sell him, then 3 weeks ago, Ross, I think we're saying, well, yeah, we can't turn that down. He has to go. Fair enough. But right now, what we're saying is, like, it'd be almost feel like it'd be more of a purposeful move to try and sell him if he's going to continue playing this badly, because it's costing us. It's really, really costing us. I think the other thing, and I know that we've spoken a lot about the defence, and it's been necessary because I think it's been a huge point of failure. But the other thing that Derek McInnes has to take into account, which I think is really interesting, is second game in the bounce. He's had to make some big changes at half time yesterday. Cammy Devlin came on alongside Nico Raskin and Finlay Curtis. Chukwani went off. Dan Neil went off. Yokota went off. Yokota, I thought was okay. He was trying to apply himself and get it within that. Chukwani, I do think is a big question mark over. Dan Neil, again, I don't think is too much of an issue, but I'm not judging him too quickly. And that is, I think, a challenge for Derek McInnes because I don't think he's got his starting 11 nailed. And I hate that phrase because I think your starting 11 should be fluid anyway. So whether or not you want to call it your starting 11, your best 11, whatever. But I don't think he's got it nailed yet. And the fact that he's having to make those changes and 3 subs last night on halftime, I think, tells you pretty much everything. It's very, very difficult to be able to see as to why he's not looking at it going, listen, do you know what? I'm going to have to be able to make changes. He made 2 changes against Dundee United at halftime. Daniel came on, Chermiti came on. And so you're focused on that saying, is there a way or is there something that I can do to be able to try and reinforce as to why it is a privilege to start the game and I'm then not having to be able to take people off if they're not applying themselves in the best way possible. I'm not going to throw that criticism at the players that I've just discussed in terms of the newer starters. Chukwani, I'm not sold on, but what I do want to understand for Derek McInnes is now that he is going to be dealing with his bread and butter domestically, he knows these teams that he's playing against. How is he going to improve that starting 11 so at least we're keeping people on for 60 minutes without having to make changes?
Yeah, so across the 2 games, Derek McInnes has had 10 available subs and used 50% of those at half-time, so that obviously does tell its own story. People talk about kind of picking the wrong side. It's maybe difficult to pick the right one with the quality that we have or accurately don't have in the squad at the minute, but even within that, it's a very telling story that he's felt as though he's had to make and has had to make such drastic changes midway through the match on both occasions. And this is maybe the benefit of the games coming thick and fast as they do at this stage of the season, because it does give him an opportunity to look at these players up close when they are under pressure domestically and in Europe to see how they fare. We've had a lot of chat so far on the site, Cammy, haven't we, about the players that McInnes seems to like so far and seems to trust. Diamandi is one of them. For me, Diamandi doesn't have an automatic right to start games for Rangers. I don't think he's shown the quality over a number of years now to be able to demand that, but he's somebody that McInnes does seem to rate. Against that, like I said earlier on, he is the kind of player that will let you down and has let other managers down in the past and has eventually got managers to sack in the past. He's not solely culpable, but he's been part of that problem. So for McInnes, what he has to be able to do now is use these opportunities to find out who he can trust in these crunch moments and where his skill sets are in these kind of players. So I'm not overly angry that he's been making these changes at halftime. I'd be more worried if he wasn't actually being proactive. I mean, you can imagine the scenes at Tannadice or in Poland last night if we didn't make drastic changes at halftime to try and freshen us up and put ourselves back in the game on both occasions.
So, freshen is, I'm sorry to interrupt. Freshen is up, absolutely, totally get that, right? I mean, I think it's a thin excuse. I'm not saying that you're saying this, Ross, right? But I think it's a thin excuse to be able to say we need to be able to try and freshen up because of fatigue or lethargy or, players have burnt themselves out and stuff because we're still at the beginning of the season, right? There should be plenty of energy in the tank. The problem is, though, that these changes are now formed out of necessity because the guys that he's picking are not doing enough for him.
Yeah, a more
Nadiri
was
Nadiri was terrible against Dundee United. And I don't want to sit in here, and I don't want this pod to be wholly negative around going after player, because I know I've went in two-footed in Fernandes, but I don't apologise for that because I think he earned it. Nadiri didn't allow the ball to stick to him when he was up at Tannadice, and I thought he looked bright when he was playing in the pre-seasons, but he was non-existent at Tannadice. And so Derek McInnes must feel exasperated when he sees these guys and he goes, right, I'm going to give you a chance. And I don't know if it's a commitment thing. I don't know if I don't know what it is, but the players are not replaying him, and then he's having to make these changes. That's the difficulty.
And yeah, and that's the massive frustration. But again, this isn't necessarily a new thing with Rangers across a number of seasons, a number of years, as it were. We start a game in a first half, very poorly. We get in at half time, the manager gives them a kick up the arse, and we go out in the second half, play really well for 10, 15 minutes, get a goal, and then stop. I know we didn't get the goal last night, but we did look better. We probably could have scored. So that's a consistent pattern as well, and it bleeds into this frustration that we've spoken about so much so far in the show, Cammy. We've spoken about for the last week in terms of the beginning of the season, is that it just feels so similar. And that is why I'm at a complete loss about how we actually change this now, because if we've changed much of the personnel on the park, we've changed the personnel off it God knows how many times now, and these things still keep happening. I don't know how we fix this. I'm all out of ideas, to be honest.
I saw a post in one of the forums last night, and I couldn't agree with it more. If Danny Rule was still in charge, we'd be getting him out. Genuinely, I really do believe that. And what I think this shows, and I hope that, and again, it's emotive because again, we've not met our expectations of hope, Ross, that we had before the season kicked off in earnest. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's early days, etc., etc. But this is probably where I feel that any focus on McInnes and what he's doing for me is very, very premature, because what we're talking about here, like you say, is where I don't think players are taking their opportunity. I think that there is definitely an assessment still to be made on the new signings. And I do give them leeway, right? I know people won't agree with that, and people might have made their minds up and stuff as well. And get all of that, right? So I'm totally cool with all of that. The only sticking point I've got to now, and the only thing that I can see is being able to try and drive, is being able to try and make sure that these players who have been at Rangers for a good period of time, that they understand as to why we need to be able to fix this slide. And it needs an upturn. That's the bottom line. And I feel it's a mega challenge for McInnes to be able to deal with, because you're almost having to get the players to convince themselves. And that's a big issue. And that's where, again, I do have some degree of sympathy for the manager, because he's walked into this and he's probably thought, right, the fresh starts, the recruitment uptake, all of these things, all of these facets should allow him a better opportunity to be able to get off to a better start than this, and it hasn't materialised. And I'm laying that at the players right now.
Yeah, and that's the worry, is that as much as I was saying earlier on, that my hope is that by the start of September, the squad looks very different to the one we have at the start of August, is what position are we going to be in at the start of September? Because quite frankly, these players can't really afford to lose much more ground anymore. And we do have some tough games coming up. You know, we're away to Aberdeen, away to Falkirk, home to Motherwell, who look like they're going to be the business again this season, and obviously get the game at Parkhead as well. You know, those are games that we absolutely have to win. We need to win them every single week in the best of times anyway. But given the circumstances, we've already lost ground in the league, and it's mental to talk about that when it's so early, but it's true. We really can't afford many more slip-ups, and then you're going to have to try and, as you say, Cammy, convince the players that they are good enough and capable enough to avoid those slip-ups. He's got a massive, massive uphill task in front of him, and maybe it was unrealistic for us to be as confident as, maybe not confident, that's probably the wrong word, but as optimistic as what some of us were at the start of the season. Given everything I said right at the top of the show, that I felt quite optimistic coming into the season. Maybe that was wrong of me to feel like that. But we are in a position now where we need to see that consistency, and we need to see it now, because any more lost ground, any more slip-ups, whether that's domestically or in Europe, is just going to pile the pressure on these players and this management team when they've barely kicked the ball in earnest, to be honest.
Yeah, and listen, we've got the cathartic part out the way, but let's talk about some positives, Ross. I mentioned before about the substitutes. I was very interested to see as to how Nico Raskan would have got on. I have criticised Nico Raskan a lot, and I am hopeful that he won't be here at the end of the month because we will have facilitated a move and we've got a decent chunk of change for him. I absolutely have to take my hat off to him last night because I thought he was committed. I thought he did drive us up a level in terms of how he applied himself and how he then started to get other players into it. Cammy Devlin, I've said already, I do like that he is, you know, not shy in letting his teammates know if he's not happy with some of the performances. He's always going to have limitations, Cammy Devlin, right? We knew we were not bringing in a world beater, so let's take that into context. And Finlay Curtis, I thought was sharp, very unlucky with the shot off the post. Again, the Finlay Curtis conundrum for me is I would love to see him stay because I do genuinely think he's got a very, very bright future at Rangers. I think he's going to be a great player for us. I just don't want to see his development delayed somewhat if he's not going to get chances at Ibrox and whether or not another loan could be the move for him. I genuinely don't know. But last night for me showed as to why that is a real, real tough decision to be able to try and make. And I thought second half, we did look brighter. We looked more organised. We were able to create things. If you're sitting here just now, Ross, saying to me, do I feel we're able to progress through the tie this time, next week? I do, because I was encouraged by what I saw in the second half. And I think when we get them back to Ibrox, we should be able to overturn the deficit. And I'm hoping that we will work hard, but not have to work hard, if that makes sense. I don't want us to have to make extraordinary efforts to beat them because I think we're capable of it. I do think we're capable of it, and I'm leading that from what I saw within the second half. And so there's the frustration I think that we've spoken about already is not that we are a poor team in terms of what we are delivering. It's just that we know that we can be a better team, so there has to be that upturn. And Rangers are going to have an opportunity to be able to do that on Sunday at Ibrox against Hibs. So the big question, I think, in terms of where things stand at the moment is, what would be your approach to how we come into Hibs, bearing in mind, obviously, we have this second leg next week?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. The first one, I'm like you, Cammy, I'm very confident of progressing next week. We should have more than enough about us at Ibrox to go and beat them and hopefully beat them well. Like you say, I totally understand what you're saying about wanting to work hard without overexerting ourselves for that win. It should be the kind of team, no disrespect to them, that we should be capable of doing that against. And if we're not, then maybe we're not worthy of qualifying for the Europa League this season. But I think that's one of the positives to come out of last night is the fact that, listen, we're still very much in this tie and I would still make us favourites for it. So I'm still pretty comfortable in that sense. And the big highlight for me, like you say, was Finlay Curtis. I think you and I had a chat in January on one of the extra shows about Finlay Curtis. And I think I made the point back then saying what's best for him and his career at this stage might be different for what's best for Rangers and what we need at this stage. And that's probably still true now, to be honest. Finlay Curtis starting games week in, week out is the best thing that could happen to him at this stage of his career. No doubt about that, right? He went out on loan, had a really, really good loan spell at Kilmarnock at the tail end of last season, got himself in the Scotland squad for the World Cup. I think has come back an even better player. So it's obviously a good thing for him. The difference is, can we afford right now for Finlay Curtis to go out on loan? I don't think Rangers can, to be honest, because he's an asset to us. And for me, he's one of the first names in the team sheet for Sunday. He's played himself into the side. He was very effective at moments last season at coming on, being very direct and getting goals. So he has end product. He was very, very unlucky not to get a goal last night as well. A couple of really good efforts. Desperately unlucky with that one off the post. He looks confident, which is not something you can say of a lot of these players, and he's direct, and he looks like he's going to score, which again is not something you can say for a lot of these players. So he absolutely starts for us on Sunday. What that then means as we get deeper into this month and towards the tail end of the transfer window, I don't know, because if we don't manage to sign anyone else on that side, I wouldn't feel comfortable letting him go out on loan. From a purely selfish perspective as a Rangers fan, I'll be totally upfront and honest about that. Because like I say, what's best for him is probably to go out and play week in, week out. But for me at that point, he'd be doing that for us because we wouldn't have anyone better or anyone working, showing that they're more consistent or have better output. So we need to weigh that up.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if he
There you go.
stays,
There you go.
if he stays, I think he plays. Right.
Yeah,
That for me is absolute.
with the squad as it currently is, and I know we're expecting a lot of flux there, but especially that sort of left hand side, if that stays as it currently is, then yeah, for me, he absolutely stays. And right now, it's his shirt, and someone has to go and take it off him. Also for Sunday, for me, Shankland obviously comes back into the side. He as well was a wee bit unlucky last night with that one that just sort of dropped him, just couldn't get his foot to it. But he's getting in the right positions. I still think Shankland will turn out to be a very good signing for us. He will get goals. I am so confident of that. So he absolutely comes back into the side on Sunday. I would keep Chermiti in, to be honest, basically just based on how poor Nadiri was against Dundee United. I wouldn't be chucking him back in at this point. I would keep Chermiti on, let him do most of Shankland's running for him, and hope we can get some end product out of him as well. It's really difficult now because we're talking about sides and picking players in a squad that I ultimately don't think is good enough as it stands currently. Some of the new signings, like I said, I do think have promise, and I'm happy enough with those. But I'm still needing to see more quality added to this. So, as much as we're kind of playing with the ball that we've got at the minute, we do need to see some quality incomings coming soon, because this just cannot be the way this squad looks at the end of August, start of September. Otherwise, we're going to be in a really dark place.
100%, 100%. And listen, I don't think it will be. I mean, I do have a huge hope that we will see a lot of movement, both in and out. So I think that there's definitely work that we will do in that space. I know that I've been keen to bang this drum in terms of let's not judge the signings too quickly, but I do get that the support is antsy about the level of recruitment and the quality we're bringing in. I'm not in that space myself yet. I'm basing this purely on this season, by the way, right? I'm not suggesting that it's been absolutely shipshape right up to now. I know that there's definitely focus and questions around that, but the manager had said that he'll be involved as part of the committee group in terms of the signings. So for me, he's having an opinion on that, and I think he's signing off on the players that he's bringing in, and we are giving him the tools to be able to do that. Whether or not those recommendations are going to be fit for purpose, I think we need to give a bit of time in order to do it. And the issue that we've got, well, the two issues that we've got at the moment, Ross, with where things sit just now, it's I think we need a really strong performance and result against Hibs. 3 points is an absolute non-negotiable, but I would like to be able to see a strong performance, but a bit of belief within this team, which I appreciate does not happen overnight. So I do get it. And the second thing is, if we continue in this trajectory, even if this squad does look wholly different by the end of this month, there are real pitfalls that, if we do have a real problem in Europe, there are financial implications to that, which we all know. But equally at the same point as well, I'm not willing to concede more ground in the league, because I think it starts to drum into the narrative of, oh, brilliant, we get to Halloween and all of a sudden we're talking about a managerial change again. And I thought it was a great point. I read elsewhere about this is probably where the Danny Rowe move was good for us, because I think if Rowe had stayed in place, then that noise goes up a level, and it's not happening at the moment for McInnes. But he needs to get results on the board, and these players need to be able to deliver for him. Otherwise, that noise will get louder.
Yeah, I totally agree with that with the Danny Rowe point as well. I think at the tail end of last season, I could see, Final Destination style into the future, how that one ended, and it ended in the same way in my eyes, the way that all the other ones have, with the managerial change by Halloween. Because there's no such thing as a clean slate. Is their first bad result, whether that was against Dundee United or last night, say it was Danny Rowe in the dugout, people have been saying, well, this is just a continuation of the failures of last season, so we need to move him on. So it probably did suit all parties, him moving on in the summer. But yeah, I think what you said is absolutely true. What we need to see on Sunday is more than just a scrappy 1-0 win. As welcome as 3 points would obviously be, and you're right to say it's a non-negotiable, it's not going to assuage any fears at that point. If we can go out on Sunday with a good, complete 90-minute performance, which is basically going from 0 to 100, but, we live in hope. If we can see that, get a couple of goals, see some good performances from a few of the new boys in particular, then that will just settle the place down a wee bit, especially if we then build on that and progress to the playoff round of the Europa League qualification. That will just dampen the noise a wee bit and maybe give them some breathing space as well. But it's really their own fault, the players, Cammy, because they've not afforded themselves that breathing space so far with poor and incomplete performances across the board. So if they do want to, as I say, just dampen that noise a wee bit, give themselves that room, grow their own confidence, it has to start on Sunday with a good 90-minute performance with a good lot of goals that makes us all leave happy.
Yeah, and I'm never ever going to say that being a Rangers player is easy. I'm genuinely not. And I was at the end of last season that I was a voice that said whoever we bring in across the summer, right, and whenever it happens across the summer, we need to be able to really make sure that we've got a solid assessment of those individuals and their characters about being able to understand what playing for Rangers really genuinely means. And as much as we'll feel we're in a bit of a quagmire at the moment, and it's not all doom and gloom, right? I'm really genuinely not suggesting that, because I think there are some positives. And we know it could be worse, right? So we're not in that position yet. So I genuinely don't feel that way just now. But as much as you're hearing about the frustration and the anger that's coming from the support in terms of how we've started, it's because we've had that, as you mentioned at the start, Ross, we've had that optimism and that turnover. It's a new leaf, and we want to be able to start the new season well with all of these changes, and it hasn't went our way in the way that we would have thought of. We as fans, I think, need to be able to try and temper that a little bit. You mentioned it earlier on, we can't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So I think it's definitely going to improve. I am confident of that. But that anger and that frustration that you'll hear from the fans, it will come with vocal support. It'll come with physical support as we get to away games, as we get across, the European games and stuff as well. We had a great travelling support in Poland last night. And Rangers fans will be there, and we will be there to back you. But it's the responsibility of the players to give us something to back. And we'll forgive you if you've got limitations in your ability, if you've got challenges around that, if you're new to the place. And I do think that we will exercise some patience. I tend to remove a lot of the periphery noise from social media and stuff, because social media is not, it's not real, right? So I'm not interested in any of that. What I want us to be able to do, though, is use Sunday as an opportunity to start to right those wrongs. And if some players do need to reflect, then okay, fine, then go and reflect. But if you are struggling to come up with answers, then I think it's a fair question to ask: is, do you feel you should be here? But the glory and the potential glory that could await you versus the fear of failure, it massively outweighs it, because you can achieve success here. And I think that we are moving in the right direction with that. And I think, we've seen concerted investment get in. I know that lot are doing their marquee. I couldn't care less. I genuinely couldn't care less, because I think they're a shambles at the best of times anyway. But the problem is, Ross, even when they're a shambles, we've struggled to beat them. So now if we can turn up, then, we can start to apply ourselves, and Sunday gives us a reset to be able to do that.
Yeah, we need to use it as a springboard for the rest of the season, don't we? I think you're right. Being a Rangers player is not easy, but we are easily pleased as fans. And I don't want to do the whole just win thing, but basically that's it. If you win games of football for Rangers, then we will forgive pretty much any other sin that you can commit, because that is the most important thing for us. And you hit on something there that I think is so important. That I think there is a bit of a culture of a fear of failure, and I understand it, because God knows I've been there when we have let ourselves down as a team, and been in the stands, vocalising that rage, really, that disappointment that's been building over a number of years now for us, and that's why I don't think we have the temperament to keep going like this. However, the upside of that, if you can bring us something, if you can bring us silverware, if you can go and win the title, then all the glory on God's earth is yours at that point. And that has to be the incentive. And if you are a Rangers player, I appreciate it's not easy, But that is the way you need to be able to look at it. You can't look at a game or a league playing for Rangers going, oh God, I'm terrified that we're going to lose today. You need to have that real enthusiasm to go and win it. And that is the glory that's there for you. It's there if you want it. It really, really is, because I think you're right. Celtic are not in the best of places themselves right now. There is an opportunity for this group of players. How many of them are still here at the end of the summer transfer window, and there is an opportunity for this management team and this club to go and do something quite special this season. And that's the way they need to look at it. So as much as this has been a bit of a black pill of a extra, Cammy, and I do apologise to the listeners for that, because it's not been a fun one to do either, there is still, for me at least, a wee bit of hope and optimism there, and that's what I'm clinging on to going into Sunday and the rest of the season.
Yeah, 100%. And listen, we'll always be honest and heart and hand. And I think if we came on and wanted to be all singing, all dancing, bells and whistles, everything's great, then it's a falsehood to the listeners who have been with us for so many years. So I hope you found a little bit of cathartic relief in terms of listening to us. It's always good to talk about Rangers, and I would say that as well, because we get some of these issues out in the open, we can talk about them rationally. And, you know, I'm right and I'm wrong, and more often wrong, Ross, right? But the thing that's important to me is that we can come on and talk about this and see if our views align, and we will think about things that we haven't thought about before because of those conversations. So that's why I do think that there is always a good bit of counselling involved in it as well. So, yeah, hopefully people have enjoyed it. That will do us for this week. David will be back with you on Flagship on Monday to discuss the Hibs game. I will be back with you next Friday because it will be after the second leg against Jagiellonian, and David again will be back with you the following week. So we've got plenty of programming across on our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/Heart and Hand. Please feel free to jump in there. You'll get loads of great Rangers content, brilliant value for money. So please make sure and join up to our community. It is absolutely buzzing for us being able to get to the end of this season and be league champions. Thank you to the Rangers Youth Development Company, our sponsor, as always, and also to Saley. Please go on and check out their respective sites as well. And thank you to Mike Lee and to Paul Myers. Thank you to you all for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it as best you possibly can. But my big thanks goes to what was a tough show to come on and talk about, but he's done an excellent job as always. Ross, thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me.
Right, folks, we will be back with you on Monday. If you're heading along to Ibrox on Sunday, I hope you enjoy the game. Let's get 3 points and let's get this on track for where we deserve to be. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll speak to you again on Monday. Bye-bye.